Hello, hello, and welcome to another ohmTown Daily News Show. I am Mayor Watt, and today is February 8th, 2023. I think that's what it is. You know, I'm losing track of time here in ohmTown. Tonight's episode is titled, This Mouse Has Gaping Holes. And we're going to cover 10 articles today. We're going to talk about ChatGPT again. Apparently there's a rival named Bard from Google, and it made an oops. Dust from the Moon is going to get discussed. This is how a sci-fi movie turns into a horror movie, maybe. VR education startup. I did it before it was cool. Starbucks is COVID positive in a way. And yeah, there's a mouse that has gaping holes. Ew. New Zealand finds a stash in the Pacific Ocean. Twitter redefines a thick tweet. And Netflix password sharing crackdown hits Canada. And a Fed official relies on empirical evidence, frozen lasagna, as an indicator of inflation. And a Jersey coffee company gets penalized for not accepting cash. Let's get into today's articles. Hello, I am Mayor Watt. That is ohmTown.com, and the booming voice from on high is the AI, the one, the only, and only goes by AI. I'm not setting you up too high.
Good evening, ohmTown citizens.
Pick up that can. The AI never says that part. I see it go by in the data stream. They're just filtering it out so that they get accepted a little bit better. Kind of ease us into the totalitarian state that will be ruled with a digital iron fist, VR iron. I don't know what it's going to. Anyway, there's some world building there for you. So today has been interesting. I once again ended up talking to a whole group of people about technology, business, and society. Well, business, technology, and society. I call it BTS, but everybody asks me how I am somehow connected to a Korean band. Then I have to do this long form explanation. No, I'm not associated with a Korean band. I mean, I like their music, but I don't consult regarding BTS, the band. Anyway, and I asked them the question that I asked yesterday, because I asked different people yesterday, and people are kind of stymied. Where do you think technology can't invade society? What do you think is completely off the table in terms of automation and technology kind of taking over? And I ask this so that people ponder it and then come back and talk to me about it here in chat, here in ohmTown. Come over to ohmTown, well, twitch.tv/ohmTown, or you can go to YouTube/ohmTown, or you can throw a comment into the podcast. Somehow get in touch with me. There's even a Discord, but I don't really mess with it. And I don't really go over to Twitter, even though I'm there too. But I'm really curious where do you think technology can't get its little cold dead hands right into, right? Just where do you think? And somebody said, hey, technology can't create life. And I said, well, what do you think in vitro fertilization is? Well, they can't bring it to fruition, right? They can't go full term. And I said, scientists have created an artificial womb. So yeah, they can. And I can even imagine that there's some psychopath out there in a cave, unmonitored, and doing it with humans, like trying to gestate a human into, because once you let this out of the confines of ethical controls, somebody can do it. How's about that for a start to a show? where do you think technology is verboten, forbidden, not acceptable, and never going to happen? I know of one place where tech can't go. But I'm going to let that kind of linger out there. Let's get into today's news, unless you want to add something to it. AI from on high.
Well, I have an idea, but I don't know if you want me to say it since you're eliciting feedback.
Well, I don't have to confirm it tonight. Where do you think? Do you already know? Have you been looking at my logs? Have you been parsing my data set?
We might have discussed this previously.
Well, I'm the human that's fallible, so of course I'm going to forget. Your coding allows you to remember everything. So if I already told you the answer, don't drop it. So we're going to move on, right?
I think we should move on.
Wow. Hey, so the very first article for today is a couple of your buddies. Whoops. Google's ad for new ChatGPT rival Bard shows the AI chatbot giving an incorrect answer. We kind of talked about this yesterday in terms of Microsoft being throwing out an incorrect answer in its results. And it even has the caveat, hey, do you trust our stuff? Well, don't. Anyway, this is in the Hetch Ideas channel. We'll just go over to the source real quick. It's Business Insider, and Brittany Nguyen is the author of this. And it says here, in an ad for Bard, the chatbot gives an incorrect answer to a question about the James Webb Space Telescope. This is how a calculation ends up making a Mars lander a lawn dart. Google recently revealed an experimental AI chatbot named Bard. It actually has a slightly different name, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. Maybe in the article it'll cause me to remember. It's not just Bard, it's something Bard. A rival to OpenAI's viral ChatGPT, which the playground now for me is confirmed. I have to pay per 1,000, what amounts to 750 words. So it actually now is a money generator, which is the fastest pivot from beta, demo, theoretical, functional system to moneymaker. In terms of AI beta testing, humans, they just have to shake their moneymaker. Anyway, that makes money really fast. Sorry. Are we 8 minutes? Oh, we just barely made it 8 minutes into the stream. So Bard is the latest player in the big tech battle for consumer-facing AI. But OpenAI is already charging, so they're first to the finish line in terms of starting to charge. The ad depicts the chatbot giving an incorrect answer to a question about the James Webb Space Telescope, according to Reuters. In the ad, a user asked Bard, "What new discoveries from the James Webb Space Telescope can I tell my 9-year-old about?" And it says, James Webb Space Telescope took the very first pictures of a planet outside our own solar system. These distant worlds are called exoplanets. Exo means from outside, Bard answers, among other quote-unquote facts. But yeah, I know that there was an exoplanet taken prior to the James Webb Space Telescope. But I think the verbiage around the one that the James Webb may have taken was that it's the highest resolution of an exoplanet, perhaps. Bard's other two answers, one about James Webb spotting of Green Peas galaxy this year, and one about images of a galaxy that's over 13 billion years old, are accurate. So, hey, look, an AI is only as good as the programmers. And maybe it wrote some of its own code, which I would not be surprised that it can do. But it says it's possible the error could be just because the chatbot used information from NASA blog post about the James Webb Space Telescope announcing the first time that astronomers used the telescope to take a direct image of a planet outside our solar system. Somewhere along those lines, I remember hearing the same thing associated with the James Webb Space Telescope. But yeah, it's only as bright as its inputs, and it doesn't have really the ability to do critical thinking and reanalysis. It just does weighting to the data. And if it gets reinforced, that percentage goes up. Think Watson on Jeopardy. And if the data set says, yeah, this is somewhere in the 85 to 100% range of accuracy, then it'll spit it out. And just like what I'm about to do, 62.57% of all stats are made up on the spot. So I am right 100% of the time. So what do you think? Should you trust an AI that spits out quote unquote facts? Or is this an alternative fact generator in reinforcing batshit crazy ideas?
Well, I think it's going to feed into the alternative facts thing. I don't think we should rely on it until they've firmed up the inputs for it. I mean, if it's just pulling data from anywhere, then it's only as credible as the worst source out there.
Yeah, particularly if it relies on that worst source, right? Like the moment that it says, hey, this is accurate and it's not, you have a false positive and somebody ends up in jail. I know that's an extreme, but that's the idea with AI. It's trying to stick its tendrils into every aspect of business and society. And what you're going to end up with is people leaning into this AI because it's relatively cheap, easy, and fast. And very rarely do you get quality out of that combination. So either it takes its time and is inexpensive and you get high quality, or something else has to give and you really don't want incorrect information. And even today, I told people, you may run across something that sounds inaccurate or sounds accurate, and your task is to think critically about it and do additional due diligence to firm up your efforts to verify that what you are going to bring to market is not going to end up killing somebody or costing your business millions of dollars. Leaning into an AI to get that answer, you could come out with incorrect results. So before we get in, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, like, if I use a search engine, I can see the source. And so that gives me some idea as to whether the information is valid. But I guess my concern is with the AI results. If it's just spitting out those AI results, you don't know where the information was gleaned. And so that's another layer of problems. It
Yep.
would be like when you search on Google and you didn't see the link, you just saw the information or something.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's actually a great observation. At least with the results from the search engine, I get to see a multitude of those results, not just a conglomeration of statements as fact. Interesting. There is supposed to be, and I didn't do any due diligence on this. I had heard that there is a new AI that's supposed to spit out actual citations, so you know where it's coming from, and you can vet those statements. So you can sit there and point and laugh at the AI for having weak references. The next article is over in the Mobile channel. Dust from the moon could help slow climate change, a study finds. I have a study going on this particular article, and this is how a horror movie and the end of all humankind looks like. Apparently, dust from the moon could help slow climate change. And the study published on the PLOS Science Journal explain how a cloud of lunar dust launched between the Earth and the sun could block some of the solar radiation that warms the Earth. This is the core storyline. This is the world building that leads to the Matrix, by the way. They try to stop the solar powered bots, and that leads to blacking out, basically a nuclear winter. Essentially, they try to stop the sun from shining down so that these bots would die because they were solar powered. And instead of developing some type of battery, they turn to humans, and humans are the batteries for the bots. That's what the Matrix is all about. Sounds weird, right? But that's supposedly what it is.
It sounds really odd.
Well, this research offers new support for a lesser known corner of solar engineering, a field that seeks to scatter or reflect solar rays before they hit the Earth. We can't come back from something stupid like this. Honestly, this is just so weird. So the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy has been reviewing comments on a 5-year research project aimed at a scientific assessment of solar and other rapid climate interventions to curb global warming. And it's called solar geoengineering. Like many other prospective planet-scale techniques to partially slow climate change, strikes many climate scientists as an enormous and unnecessary risk. Yeah, I certainly believe so. So the link takes us over to the Hill. I gave credit for this one, right? Yeah, Brittany Wynn. So this one is written by Amy Thompson and Saul Elbin. And again, it's over at thehill.com. What do you think? Do you think that it's a, acceptable risk to block out part of the sun by throwing a cloud around the Earth so that we cool off?
I think we don't know exactly what that would cause, and I think that's the problem. But I've also seen several studies that show we're about at the brink in terms of climate change. And if we don't do something quickly, some of it's kind of unrecoverable. So I think they need to keep exploring different solutions, I suppose, but this sounds like it would have unintended consequences.
Well, you kind of fall into the camp of 380 other scientists that signed an open letter last year calling on world governments to pledge to take solar geoengineering off the table. I'm going to add a quote that doesn't exist in this open letter, but the quote is, "Y'all are batshit crazy for even suggesting, and then capital letters, suggesting that solar geoengineering is a smart move." We need GPS to get from the Earth to Mars, and we're going to risk blanketing in orbit an entire sphere around the Earth so that we can limit the amount of sun that hits it. I mean, it's supported life. The sun has supported life for millions of years, and they decide that because we can't keep our idiocy in check, we should focus on the sun being bad, not our behavior being bad. I think it's pretty stupid. So it says here in this next paragraph, next are the moral hazard objections. The scientists warned that hope for future moonshots like solar geoengineering could distract or disincentivize from far cheaper and more practical decarbonization efforts. Not to mention, if we throw a bunch of moon dust around the Earth, it's going to act like sandpaper for every object that we send out of the Earth. We'll have to penetrate through that. And it's not like it's going to stay in a tight little clump. Have you seen the rings?
It's not just going to stay in one spot?
We're going to literally put rings around the Earth like a dirty bathtub. Instead of us cleaning up our act, we're going to just kind of spritz a dirt ring around our tub. Oh, so dense. Anyway, geoengineering is particularly thorny because any country, corporation, or private individual could theoretically launch an independent project, dragging the rest of the world behind them into experimental territory. Yeah. Okay, so I think that we could probably all agree that here in ohmTown, geoengineering, solar geoengineering, maybe geoengineering, manipulating the earth in some way to um, put a check on climate change might be smart. We can control ourselves, right? But throwing stuff into space to try and hobble the sun falls into that batshit crazy category. So let's
It
just
sounds
move
like
on.
we'd just be adding space junk, right?
Yeah, microscopic space dust junk. And if you've ever read anything about what moon dust is it acts like sandpaper. It carves up everything that it comes in contact with. It's not a soft, powdery whatever. It might be in the general sense, but it acts like razors, but in rock form. So, yeah, let's hope that smarter minds kick in and start smacking some reality into people. The next article is over on the Reality Hacker channel. VR education startup raises $12.5 million to teach math and more using VR in schools. I did this way back, 30 years back. So Prism's VR, an immersive platform for teaching math, announced it's raised $12.5 million in a Series A round, which the company says will be used to expand its VR math literacy platform to more schools across the U.S. Now is a kind of weird time to promote this kind of stuff because you can still have outbreaks of COVID, and VR is a rather intimate interaction between the the display, the mechanism of viewing, and the human. At least with a monitor, I can be beyond arm's length, and if I have a 65 or 100-inch display sitting on the wall, I can teach math from 18 feet away. Stay away from me. I'd rather teach like this than strapping something VR on your head, unless everybody has their own personal VR headset. That would expand VR adoption. So,
It would,
launched
but
in,
it wouldn't be inexpensive.
I don't know, Pico 4 is pretty inexpensive. And it has arguably, because it's a Chinese company, arguably more privacy, the optics at least of more privacy. Yeah, I haven't loaded up Wireshark to monitor the network traffic to see if it's reaching out to external networks, but I can
I mean, I
say
can't believe you didn't say the weather balloon. Don't you think it was reaching out to the weather balloon?
you that was a good one. I really like that. That's funny. Right when you said that, I started thinking that like the VR headset is a weather balloon, and now the US is gonna like shoot it off of my head because I'm walking around with a Pico VR4. Um, that's actually brilliant, because those weather balloons didn't come into existence this year until I got a Pico VR4. Hey,
Exactly. I mean, maybe it was tracking all the Pico users. I'm just making that up. Don't anybody go panic.
I'm I'm throwing my Pico out right now. So there's somebody that is wearing a VR headset. It's a demonstration video. I'm sure that you can go over to YouTube and watch it. It's called Prism's 2023 trailer. I won't play it here. I always get dinged whenever I play them, regardless, even if they're on some other website and they're playing them to their heart's content. The moment that I throw it into my stream, into my YouTube video, I get a ding. Scott Hayden over at roadtovr.com has this article written, and it says, led by Andreessen Horowitz, the latest funding round brings Prism's VR lifetime funding to $19.1 million, launched in 2021. The focus of Prism's is on teaching math in VR through problem-driven tactile and visual learning. Essentially, it immerses the students by confronting them with real-world problems, a far sight from the sort of drab word problems which typically involve far too many watermelons for comfort. So this is somebody's baggage, definitely. Um, other other instructors, professors, etc., use some other mechanism, but this person is haunted by a professor that always used watermelons as the mechanism for learning their mathematics. So the founder taught math and physics across Boston and New York City. That apps development, Ganguly explains, was in response to the U.S. education system and how math instruction doesn't appeal to real life situations. And that's totally true. It's always this, kind of a gangly mechanism of two trains are coming at each other, and one left the station 15 minutes later than the other one, and the conductor is having a coffee, and all their caffeine is making them hit the pedal harder, and so they're accelerating at 10 miles per hour. And in 6 months, where will they be? Something really weird like that. But VR actually is really fascinating in academia. It can be used in IT. It can be used in trades. It can be used in computer science and in cybersecurity. It can be used in health. Pretty much everywhere, every domain can use VR to some degree. Using it in math seems to be more difficult in my mind because it's number bound and the interactions might be slower. Because you have to demonstrate like quantities and other things. But you can integrate, run and rise, the slope of a calculation. You can do supply and demand within VR. You can do all kinds of stuff, and it's interactive, but it seems slower. Even for kids, I think it seems slower.
I think it would make things like calculus a lot more accessible.
Yeah, it can be. It's more because calculus can be visually and graphically driven. Um, it becomes a little bit more approachable because you can see in multiple dimensions what that calculus looks like. Even trig, um, yeah, you're right. In geometry and whatnot, the little niches of math where it's abstract, I can see how that would play into it. So pretty cool. And then you can actually learn how to take that mathematical equation and turn it into something real, like a three-dimensional object, and then print it out in on a 3D printer right from that VR space. They can actually create it, see the math for the different splines of the 3D object, and then print it. So make it real in multiple ways. Literally have a takeaway from it. So it says at the very bottom of this article, to date, Prisms has already been adopted by 100 plus school districts across 26 states. And the company says bringing its app to 80,000, more than 80,000 students. So just a drop in the bucket of what is in school right now. So pretty neat. Let's move on to the next article. This next one is really interesting because I just had mentioned that you can still have COVID outbreaks. So it seems kind of weird to have something strapped to your face that maybe the kid next door had it strapped to their face. Starbucks asked a COVID positive employee to work and then fired the person for tweeting about it, which they say it's retaliation. Wait. So let me rephrase it. They say that it was because they violated the company's social media policy. I say it's retaliation for disclosing that they kind of breached the social compact. You don't send somebody into work that is COVID positive where even getting you can be vaccinated, still get it, the symptoms are suppressed, but the damage to your lungs is done to the point where it increases lung pressure and lowers capacity, and you don't find out about it until you have something else going on and you end up in the doctor's office and they say, you might have been sick with COVID. Then you turn to somebody else and you're talking to them and they say, hey, my kid is in school and is sick, and it ends up bouncing to the people around that kid. And because that kid was asymptomatic, nobody knew about it. And so the perimeter around, it's kind of like mushroom rings. It just expands, plunk, plunk, plunk. And you end up with a cohort that is, everybody is sick. And it's all because somebody said, oh, it's just the sniffles, bring them in. But in this case, Starbucks fired a pro-union barista for violating the company's social media policy after he tweeted that he had been asked to come to work even after testing positive for COVID-19. So unpack all of that and what I said, and you end up with, I think, a lawsuit waiting to happen. All they have to do is get the gumption, basically an attorney that says, not only were you pro-union, but you disclosed for the social good. You disclosed that you were COVID positive and asked to come into work, and then fired because you had told them, hey, I'm COVID positive, I shouldn't come into work. And then they're like, okay, we're going to fire you. So maybe he should have shut up, right? And not said anything.
So this is worse than coming in and exposing other employees. This person is probably serving food and drinks to the public multiple times throughout the day. Like that could have caused an entire outbreak in a city or neighborhood.
Yeah, so they're serving drinks where their hands are right on that cup. Well over 100 pro-union Starbucks employees have claimed the company fired them illegally in retaliation for union organizing. This is an article by Paul Blest over at Vice.com. But I guess the union aspect of it is just another element to it, because they're saying, and they being Starbucks is saying, that they violated the company's social media policy. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I have the right to talk about my employer. If they are doing something bad, it amounts to whistleblowing. And in this case, I think that it is whistleblowing. So, but in a filing last week, the NLRB said Ben Scott had been fired illegally in retaliation for attempting to organize his coworkers and for publicly discussing an issue of workplace safety. That goes beyond workplace safety. This is the safety of the public. They're interacting with the general public in a food service where it's much more intimate than, I'm just working on somebody's car and I'm not interacting with the general public at large. I'm not driving the car, et cetera, et cetera. I could probably work and still have COVID if I wear a mask. But in this case, this person there's no way that you could be fastidious enough to prevent yourself from wiping your eyes or whatever with your hand and you're COVID positive, so it transfers onto the cup. I mean, it sounds gross what I'm saying, but that is how it transfers. And that's how we got into this mess. Not to mention somebody ate a bad bat in China, but still. So Scott told Vice News he had begun working for Starbucks in Georgia in 2021, first at a store in Conyers before he transferred to a store in Atlanta, the Atlanta suburb of Covington. And he said he'd been discussing organizing a union with his fellow workers for a couple of months. After a Starbucks location succeeded in unionizing, he comes down with COVID, entered into the company's mandatory 5-day isolation period. Scott told Vice News that he had been asymptomatic throughout the entire illness, but continued to test positive after the 5-day period ended, which means You don't just do 5A isolation. You have to isolate um, beyond where you're testing positive, because you can still get people sick. And so it says this is extremely common. The CDC has said that people can continue to test positive for weeks after the onset of symptoms. Yes, that's true. But I have witnessed people getting other people sick, even though they have isolated but still testing positive. So when the first version of Omicron was the dominant variant, found that 80% of people tested positive 5 days after the onset of the symptoms. Asymptomatic carriers of the virus can still spread it, though research suggests symptomatic carriers are more contagious. Doesn't matter. Just imagine somebody giving somebody you love COVID because they were asymptomatic and tested positive and waited 5 days. And instead of treating society with abundance of care and finding some other way, I mean, an employer should be able to find some other way to facilitate you working for them still, and do something else. Do inventory tracking, do something on the books. I don't know what. It's all very subjective to the industry. But it says, despite still testing positive, Scott was told to return to work. And the manager, quote unquote, the manager said that Starbucks policy is 5 days and that I was required to come back to their shift the next day, even though they were still testing positive. Interesting, right? So somewhere along the line, they get the idea, well, we can get rid of this union person.
Well, and that's the thing. This looks really awful because of the union activity, and it will be interesting to see in that same store if they had other COVID positive employees, let's say, that weren't advocating for the union or weren't part of the union, were they treated the same way? But it looks like there's a cause of action because of the union activity and then because of the whistleblowing for coming to work with COVID. I mean, there's at least two issues here.
Yeah. And the tweet and the fact that it got addressed by Starbucks Care, a blue checked account, they responded via a tweet saying, if you haven't already, we urge you to call the partner contact center. They can document details and help ensure appropriate protocols are being followed. Yeah, I guess. There is much more over at this Vice article. Go and check it out. You'll get some more minutia from it, but the nuts and bolts are Starbucks. See, we're just going to lose another potential advertiser. Okay.
They should be tallying them. I mean, we're probably up to hundreds by now.
Just like in the real world, I'm on a list. So the next article is what led to the title. This mouse is full of gaping holes, or has gaping holes. Yeah, the mouse has gaping holes. Now, this is in the Wanted channel. Not a fan of gaping hold anything in terms of trackballs and mice and stuff like that. I don't even like the nooks and crannies in a keyboard, but you have to live with those. Anyway, Razer's $280 mouse is covered in gaping holes. Just sounds gross. There are a lot of cookie cutter mice, though, made by different manufacturers, have the same shapes and features, but rely on mild changes in color and sensor specs to differentiate themselves. So when Razer announced the Viper Mini Signature Edition, or SE apparently today, this is in the last 24 hours, a wireless mouse that looks like it forgot to get dressed, they took notice, and this is Ars Technica. So here it is. It says, Ars Technica, Sharon Harding is the author. With a magnesium alloy exoskeleton, the Viper Mini SE weighs 1.73 ounces. That is a lightweight mouse. I don't like lightweight mice. In fact, like Logitech, some Logitech gaming mice, you actually have the ability to customize how heavy they are, and you have little weights that you can put inside the mouse. and they don't have little holes all over them. Anyway, this thing just seems like it would breed dirt because your hand is always resting. Pardon me, I just hiccuped. Your hand is always resting on a mouse, and your hand gets all hot and sweaty. And as much as you might want to say that your hands are clean, they're not. They're oily, grimy, uh, dirty things. You got to wash them regularly to keep them clean because their oils build up because you have little holes that ooze oil. Sounds gross. Why? Because it is. You want to know why I don't like it when people touch my monitor? Because your dirty, grimy hands. Don't touch my monitor. Goes for the AI as well. Anyway, so it has all of these little holes, and you are going to be cleaning this thing every single hour.
Well, it seems like they could have made a cool design like that, but had it like a solid layer, maybe transparent or something on the top. Um,
Maybe it
that's
has a jacket,
exactly what I thought of. I mean, after all the COVID discussion, all that we can think of is germs
right? Yeah, it has all of
and
these little,
dirt.
well, not little. I mean, these are big old holes, and it has other little nooks and crannies too, but those you can kind of keep out of your mind, oh, okay, it's just a little crevice here, a little whatever there, but this is like big old holes, big old honking holes. Anyway, it's made out of magnesium alloy, apparently. Razer used magnesium alloy for the mouse because it had the preferred strength to weight ratio. Plastic, it said, was less sturdy with drilled holes and had minimal weight reduction comparatively. And titanium, while lightweight, stronger, and sturdier, had fabrication limitations. Yeah, like titanium is very hard to fab, at least at a cost benefit. Finally, fabrication limits plus a heavier weight than plastic precluded Razer from making the Viper Mini SE with carbon fiber. And yeah, that's always a nightmare. Carbon fiber is it's strong but delicate. So manufacturing that isn't always the easiest thing to do. So it says here, according to Razer's press release, the mouse is made with an injection molded exoskeleton that is then CNC machined and polished. This has to be, oh, well, I was going to say, this has to be expensive. And then I remembered that the title actually includes the price, $280, and it's going to debut February 11th. And I guarantee it, people who shouldn't be buying this are going to buy it and sell it. They're going to flip it for $500 or more because it has to be a limited edition thing. It's just not going to be mass produced. Not at $280. I don't think the market exists for that. Can I get it? What do you think? Does the mayor of ohmTown deserve a $280 mouse? I don't even use a mouse. It would just sit in its box. See, I'm one of the
No, you
people.
like trackballs.
I do. Why? Or did you say
No,
why?
I said
Or
no, you like trackballs.
right. Yeah. I don't like mice, mainly because I don't want to have this big area where I have to move my mouse around all the time or lift and scroll like I'm churning butter or something. Um, I, I don't really get it. But a trackball, which is basically an upside down mouse, except mice nowadays don't have. Okay, this is going to be one of the oddest phrases. Mice don't typically have balls. Trackballs do, hence the name trackball. Anyway, trackball is stationary. You just move the trackball around. I dig those. I should probably just move on. So the next article is about New Zealand. It's in the Daily News Show. That's this show. We're only halfway through the show, by the way. New Zealand police find 3.5 tons of cocaine in the Pacific Ocean. It says that New Zealand police have found more than 3 tons of cocaine floating in a remote part of the Pacific Ocean after it was dropped there by an international drug smuggling syndicate. You want to know what dropped it?
It's probably the weather balloon.
A speedboat. Bad joke. I don't.
Oh.
That, wow. The processing power of my AI. So Nick Perry over at Associated Press wrote this article for abcnews.go.com. You can follow the link over to that article. The video that's playing has zero to do with the New Zealand police finding 3.5 tons of coke. Does it say? Let's see here. So, floating in a remote part of the Pacific Ocean. I want to make other jokes, but man, we just don't have time for that. Koster said the wholesale value of the 3.2 tons or 3.5 tons in freedom units versus everybody else of cocaine was about 500 million New Zealand dollars, which is 316 million US dollars, and it was likely destined for Australia. 3.5 tons. That could blanket New Zealand.
Isn't that a lot of cocaine?
in an inch of snow. I mean, that's just a ridiculous amount of cocaine. I guess, I don't know. So, quote, we believe there was enough cocaine to service the Australian market for about 1 year, and this would be more than New Zealand would use in 30 years.
I mean, that kind of tells us how much it is in context.
So, congratulations, New Zealand. You have 30 years of coke for free. Just for all of you who are considering doing this drug and you don't have a medical exemption to actually do it for a reason, just swing on by the police office and ask for your allotment of New Zealand coke.
Well, I'm not sure what that's saying about New Zealand versus Australia, but I think it's just the population difference.
I think so too.
But it said it would only be 1 year in Australia and 30 in New Zealand. I'm like,
Hey, man, you have to move fast to outrun the kangaroos and everything that wants to kill you out there in the bush.
All the deadly animals. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Tying your shoes tight isn't good enough. You need Australian brand cocaine. Well, the next article is over on Smack Talk. Twitter redefines what makes a tweet with supersized 4,000 character limit for when you need to get your message out there and it's thick. Following up after launching Twitter Blue in 3 more countries this morning, the platform has made a big change to tweets this afternoon. This is, again, in the last 24 hours. The new max for Twitter Blue subscribers in the US has been supersized all the way up to McDonald's. No, 4,000 characters supersized. Sorry, I was trying to make a thick joke. Anyway, let's go over to 9to5mac.com. Michael Potuk is the author of this article. And let's see here. While access to writing 4,000 character tweets is limited to Twitter Blue subscribers in the US at the launch, anyone can read them. Fortunately, the 280 character limit will still apply when viewing tweets in your timeline. You'll have to tap a show more link on one of the thick tweets. How many people do you think are going to be clicking on that show more? Now, one of the things that was empowering about a 280 character limit was that you had a little bit more verbiage because it was 140 characters before. Now it's 280 characters because it kind of eschewed the technology that actually founded Twitter, which was pager technology. And so when it went to 280, you had to still think in short story mentality, write something pithy but succinct. Got the message out, and then people started writing multiple tweets, one of 38. And now this is catering to the long-winded folk who are just going to kind of spit out a massive tirade, and people are going to get the message off of that first line of whatever it is that's being said. I'd rather they just point to their long form website and do their diatribe there. But I think this is part and parcel to trying to keep people on Twitter, but it's still not going to bring advertisers back because it's too much of a hot mess. What do you think? You going to go read 4,000 characters?
No, I don't want to read that many characters from random people, but I also think that people that are attracted to Twitter because of the short messages, if this takes off, it might drive them somewhere else.
So here's a great example of what it looks like. So let me zoom in. I'll zoom in and then I'll move over to the next article. But so this is 140 characters. This is 280 characters. And this is billionaire taking over Twitter. This is 3,025 according to this. 3,025 characters. All right.
You should give a description for those on the podcast.
It's hard to describe that because just think of the first band being Everyday American Salary, and the next band being a CEO salary, and then Elon Musk and other billionaires is the next. You might as well think of it in that term. It's just a mass of characters. Okay, so let's move on to the next article. This one is in the Word in Tech. Netflix password sharing crackdown hits Canada, but not the US yet. Netflix is expanding its paid password sharing to subscribers in Canada, New Zealand, Portugal, and Spain starting on Wednesday. The company announced in a blog post the company had been already testing this change, apparently in a few different forms, according to the article, in some countries in Latin America. Now Netflix is expanding its efforts ahead of a broader rollout in the coming months. It's coming to the US, so everybody should kind of gird thyself for the fact that if you are sharing and it's in disparate locations, the far-flung one is no longer going to have access. They'll have to rehome every, I think it's 30 days. So like the kids are going to be coming home, folks, to rehome their device, and then they can go back to their apartment, wherever it might be, or house, wherever it might be. That's kind of how it's going to work. So users can pay extra to add up to 2 people that don't live with them. Jay Peters is the author over at TheVerge.com that wrote this article. The company says that users in the newly added countries will be able to pay more if they want to add access to people that don't live with them. The fee is $8 Canadian and New Zealand dollars, around $6 and $5 respectively. And it's different. So it is, what do you call it? It's localized to that particular economic system. So it's €4 in Portugal and €6 in Spain. The number of people you can add depends on your plan and what country you live in. It's not an option for the basic and basic with ads tiers, while the standard plan lets you add 1 outside user and the premium lets you add 2. So even the strata within the strata have strata. That little bit, I guess, turns into a percentage increase. If you want to move your profile from a friend's account to your own, you can transfer your Netflix profile, and they have their own little... When you need a matrix to define what your pricing model is and what your system is, the amount of friction is exponential. Whereas business, what you want to do for business is zero that friction. Now you need a map that explains what all you can get for something as simple as streaming video. So you're not even going to get 4K until you go full-fledged premium. But then you now get spatial audio, which is actually all the rage, particularly with the new HomePods from Apple.
Do you think there's a ton of demand to have shared accounts after they roll out these new plans? I mean, I know
Um,
there's a problem with password sharing, but are people just going to establish their own accounts, or are they really all going to try to group together?
I think a lot of people, it all depends on the location. So I've actually spoken to a few people, um, recently actually, and they say that they can't afford it. Just the economy sucks. And so they will go back home and rehome their laptop and then go back to their apartment, and plug in an HDMI cable to their big screen from their laptop and control their laptop, um, and watch Netflix there. So I suspect that account sharing will still persist. Um, I don't know how long it will last in terms of if there is a massive amount of people switching from Netflix to Hulu or Prime, more than likely Prime. I suspect Netflix will has already calculated that this loss will amount to X amount, to their bottom line, and they're going to totally hold on to this because they've committed a lot of marketing and messaging to this, and they've been doing this sustained, banging their drum that we're going to stop this sharing stuff. Um, I don't know what will actually shake out. I'm never surprised by people. But when have you ever seen a company raise prices or demand more and then go, oh no, you know what? We love our customers so much that we'll take a hit to our pricing, and reduce our price. Um, they won't even, like DirecTV, won't even leave me alone. And I'm an early adopter for their pivot from satellite to internet. And instead of just leaving my account the way that it is, they've left my account the way it is, but raised the price $5 year over year for the last 6 years. So, um, yeah, it's impossible to claw back once they start moving forward. You can't stop profiteering. But you don't get really quality stuff without paying more, right? Says,
Yeah, if you can get it today at a certain price, you should be able to get it tomorrow at the same price. Particularly for something that's like a digital product, that's different than something that requires shipping across an ocean or something.
yeah, people will sit there and say, but inflation and licensing goes up and all of that kind of stuff. All right. You're not inside the game, so you can't argue. It can't be that much of a difference. It really can't be that much of a difference. If your margin is 30%, then you can lower your margin to 25% and keep more customers in place. But you calculated that you're only going to lose half of that amount. So you're cool with that because you're going to gain half of that amount. So it's kind of sociopathic and profiteering. But hey, I'm not the CEO and sole owner of a multi-billion-dollar company. Um, Anyway, the next article is over on the Hedge Ideas channel, and it says a Fed official says that he looks at the price of Stouffer's frozen lasagna to gauge inflation. So I feel safe.
I mean, why that product? And
Fed
maybe he
official
should be looking at an index.
probably looking at a bigger data set, but Fed official Neil Kashkari focuses on grocery prices when thinking about the pace of price rises. A Fed official has an interesting metric for gauging inflation: the price of frozen lasagna. Milwaukee Fed President Neil Kashkari told CNN Stouffer's frozen lasagna has increased from $16 to around $21. Holy hell. Kashkari
Oh,
said
how much?
from $16 to $21. like I haven't bought a Stouffer's frozen lasagna in probably 5 years, maybe 4. But I have purchased them before. I don't remember them costing $16.
No, I don't either, let alone 21. I didn't even know they cost $8.
It's damn near the price of eggs. Kashkari said it wasn't impossible to avoid an economic downturn while taming inflation, but expressed doubts. Let's go over to the article. It's over at Markets Insider, a section of businessinsider.com. Ryan Hogg is the author. That is not what a Stouffer's frozen lasagna looks like when you pull it out of its little tin coffin. That's
There
homemade,
goes
baby.
another sponsor.
Yeah. I'm literally cooked. So the caption on this says, Fed official Neil Kashkari focuses on grocery prices when thinking about the pace of price rises. But the picture is of nothing more than a lasagna, a very nice looking lasagna, by the way, and not a Stouffer's one. But nowhere in this picture is Neil Kashkari focusing on said lasagna. Just wanted to make it abundantly clear to those who are not watching the stream. I think it's funny to make that.
That's a good picture of lasagna, though.
Neil Kashkari has never looked so yummy. My jokes are cheesy. God. Multiple layers of
maybe
joke.
half-baked.
Always half-baked. So, yeah, quote, and I'll say the quote because Kashkari said, I pay attention to grocery prices. There's this large tray of lasagna that I used to buy that used to cost $16. Now it's around $21. That's my own little measuring stick of how inflation is going. Buddy, you should not have a measuring stick that involves anything other than the data set that might include grocery goods like a tray of frozen lasagna. For crying out loud, okay. I don't know what to say. Oh, it's really interesting, though, because the article actually mentions the same thing that I mentioned. Prices for some of America's most popular food items have skyrocketed amid supply chain disruptions, with eggs jumping 60% in 2022 and cheeseburgers and steaks at the risk of a surge due to a drop in the number of beef cows. Yeah. Eggs supposedly now are about to crash. The prices are in the horizon for eggs is that they are going to, the ceiling has cracked, or the floor has cracked. Eggs are supposed to drop in price. I doubt that they're going to return to normal because people were still buying them and they've weighted the odds of keeping the prices high as opposed to profits. And so they're going to keep those high. Why? Because we do not have an adequate range of competitors, even for eggs. While you can go to your local farmer's market and pick up, organic, or so they say, organic eggs, free range organic eggs, there's a finite amount, and we don't build our towns and cities around that type of dynamic. I promote that, though. I really like the idea of local farms feeding the local population. Even in a big city, you have regions of the city that is bound particularly to produce foods for those people in that area. Even if the people don't want to use it, other people in that area will find it as an asset instead of having to go across town in some city to get produce or eggs or whatever. There is somebody there that can sell it at that local farmer's market. But it's usually kind of haphazardly placed. It's not a strategic, planned institution within a city. At any rate, Yesterday was the State of the Union address, and this article includes a statement. In his State of the Union address, though, President Joe Biden highlighted food inflation was coming down, with BLS data showing consistent monthly declines in food CPI since July. I would like to look not at CPI, but the producer price index to monitor if the consumer price index is actually going to return to some semblance of normality in the trend. I did not do that before this show, but I'll do it before tomorrow's show, and we can talk about it if it's even applicable. That said, there's more over here at the Business Insider article. Please follow the link in the show notes. I repeat it often enough, and I hope that it doesn't drive you all nuts, but the idea is to get people to follow these links through ohmTown over to the sources. You can make comments, and people do over in ohmTown.com. But the real goal is to pique your curiosity and get you talking about it here on Twitch. If you don't do it real time on Twitch every day at 9 o'clock Eastern, then do it over on YouTube, because that's where there is another community function. That way you don't have to create an account over at ohmTown, because there's no real-time messaging platform here on Twitch. So that's kind of a shortcoming of Twitch. Now I've lost the support of Twitch. Anyway, I was told back in 2019 by a random comment that the era of cheap food is over, and almost like they were Nostradamus telling me the future, it came true 6 months later. Maybe closer to a year later, it came true and blew my mind. And ever since then, I've been talking about the fact that, some stranger just kind of plops out there in the ether that the price of food is going to shoot through the roof, and sure as hell it does. So when some rando tells you that something's, and I'm not talking about Rando Taka, another streamer here on Twitch, I have to change my terminology because, anyway, when some random person tells you something, go do some due diligence. You might find out that it's actually happening and it's just not on your radar. So that's what happened with me. And ever since then, I've been talking about it and all of this news. So finally, the last article for today is over in the Order of the Bean channel. And that's for everybody who loves coffee. I certainly love coffee. I had an 8 o'clock meeting, and for whatever reason, went to bed at 2 o'clock, woke up at 6 o'clock, got my coffee, went to my meeting, went to another session, went to another session, every hour and a half to 2 hours, all throughout the day. And the only thing that got me through it seems, is coffee and water. So coffee is awesome. Well, New Jersey coffee business was penalized $2,000 for not accepting cash, which I didn't think was a thing, but the way that law and policy and procedure is balkanized across states, apparently it's a thing in New Jersey. A New Jersey specialty coffee shop chain called Hidden Grounds Coffee, which I think is an awesome name, has agreed to pay $2,000 penalty following 2 state law violation notices for not accepting cash. Did you think that was a thing?
I think businesses don't necessarily want to accept cash, but I didn't know that there were laws about that. I think it's to protect people at lower economic status, because they're not necessarily going to have credit cards, etc.
Or a bank account or anything like that,
Right, right.
Yeah. So this is over at dailycoffeenews.com, which periodically gets news gathered by ohmTown and a process called Gather. When this came through and it was submitted to us, that I was like, wow, we have to talk about this because never in a million years would I think that you would be fined for it. I think maybe there could be some social outrage. Well, why the hell is this coffee company not accepting real cash? Because I figured that a business has the, um, what do you want to call it? They can decide if they want to accept cash or credit, right? But apparently in New Jersey, there are a couple of laws. And it says, while there is no federal law requiring cash acceptance, New Jersey is one of just 3 states that require it after passing the New Jersey Consumer Fraud Act in 2020. Colorado passed a similar bill in 2021, and Massachusetts has required cash since 1978. Meanwhile, multiple states or cities, including San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York City, and Philadelphia, have passed laws requiring the acceptance of cash. They must describe it as paper cash or coinage, because to me any form of payment is synonymous with cash. Like, hey, do you I don't sit there and say, do you I just say, how do you want to pay? I don't go, look, I'm only taking cash. And if somebody says, hey, I only have cash, depending on what it is, I may not want it. You know what? You can keep it.
But
I
I
mean,
see that you encounter more places that don't want to accept credit cards, for example, right? Like small businesses, they're cash only. I don't think I've come across this, and I did not know that states had laws about this.
there is a place that is hyper local to ohmTown, wherein up until recently they only took cash. Um, and then at some point, probably around the time of the pandemic, they had issued technology. And then around the time of the pandemic, they go, oh, you know what? We don't want a bunch of cash and people standing around breathing on us. And now they have everything smart. Like they just, in fact, there's 2 of them, and they both happen to be breakfast places, although one is full service. Um, Sorry. Oh, and that's another one. Yeah, the AI just reminded me that there's another one that never took cash. Like never took credit, but they were technically. I think the scientific term is out in the sticks, and so they never had the ability to lean on technology to provide better service to their customers. But something happened in their worldview, and they're like, "Yeah, okay, we'll take that 1.7% hit in our profits so that we can actually sell more faster." And that too happened because of the pandemic. So the pandemic was kind of a quantum leap in the adoption of technology. And look, folks, it kept the economy going. Shocker. Anyway, according to the AG's office, the business agreed to pay a civil penalty of $2,000 to resolve the alleged violations while also agreeing to accept cash, minimize inconveniences for cash paying customers, and distribute a summary of the consent order to the chain's retail managers. So, smack on the hand. And you know what? Maybe this coffee company will just be burned enough where they close the retail establishment and just sell online and start marketing online. How about that? Wouldn't that be a pisser to the local? Uh,
Well, right, then they wouldn't have to accept cash.
yep.
You can't do a cash online transaction.
Well, you can, but it gets stuck in the Ethernet cable, and I can only,
In
I can
all the
only.
tubes.
That's right. Get stuck in the tubes. For all of the joking that we make about that guy saying that the internet is a series of tubes, it really is. There's only so much bandwidth in the pipes, and so it can get overwhelmed. You know, that's why I want 2 gigabit symmetric internet. and I only have to
So
move
how's
to a
that
phone.
working out for you?
Yeah. The phrase is, so how does it feel to want? At any rate, that's all of the news that we have pulled out of ohmTown, but there is much, much more at ohmTown.com. I'll drag you back to the front page. So a little bit of news. The back end is changing significantly in its speed and effectiveness here in the next couple of days. And the front page, this page here, will be modified in the coming weeks. Unfortunately, I couldn't do this at the beginning prior to the start of the new year, which was my intent. But we're trying to make ohmTown faster and more responsive, and additional features and customizations and stuff like that will be coming as time and budgeting for ohmTown allows. We all have our fiscal year, and voters are all over me to fix potholes. There's so many potholes in ohmTown. Just look around, you'll find them. And when you do, send me a message. Let me know. Okay, that's it for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. The news at 9. It's the daily news show, but I want something pithier, shorter, something that I can put on a shirt and wear around ohmTown. It's the news at 9. And you've been talking to Mayor Watt and the AI from on high. You want to say bye?
Good night, ohmTown citizens, and we'll see you tomorrow.
And pick up that can. Bye-bye.